Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. On the agenda tonight, we have Duane Eddy, and this is going to be coming from 1996, and it's going to be his version of Ghost Riders in the Sky. So let's get Duane up on screen and see how he gets on. I'm just going to jump in here because we've got a good flavour of the performance so far, and the way that Duane sounds when he plays, he's got his own tone in terms of having that twang, and twang is certainly a word that he's used on a lot of his albums in order to describe the sound that he gets by playing the lower notes on the guitar in that bass range, but then putting a lot of top end on it, a lot of treble, so it really does make those notes stand out and gets that twang. And certainly when he was recording, even if he didn't have the option of having a reverb chamber, he would bring in something to simulate that. And an example of that would have been a 2,000-gallon water tank that he brought into a recording session one time because he wanted to get that reverb and accentuate that twang of the guitar when he's playing those lower notes. So what you'll find with these great guitarists of yesteryear, and Duane's still around by the way, they find ways around technology in order to get the sound the way that they want it. And even if he didn't have access to all these reverb pedals and processor units that you can get nowadays, it's so easy just to get a multi-effects processor and add some reverb. Back in the day, they had to think of a way to get that sound because they couldn't just get a pedal that they pressed what they wanted and you'd get that echo chamber of exactly the same proportions that you're thinking of. And Ghost Riders in the Sky is one of those tracks that has been covered so many times in so many different ways, and it was originally written by Stan Jones in 1948. But what I love about this arrangement is the way that it is so atmospheric, especially in the intro, almost to the point where you want everybody to be quiet so you can really hear it. And of course it's going to take you straight back to the Old West because it is so atmospheric. And the way that Duane plays this, obviously that guitar tone's got to be super clean, and the reverb that is actually on the sound, that's what makes it so great and so atmospheric, and the way that Duane is playing it and the way it has to be played. And a lot of people watching this, and players that might be watching this video, might think that this is really easy to play because technically there's not a lot going on, it's just single notes and there's no real shredding in there. There is a really subtle amount of alternate picking that has to be spot on, but we'll get into that in a second, because the key to this performance is the expression, and that's something that Duane absolutely nails. It's all about that subtle dip in pitch that we have at very certain parts within the composition that's achieved with that Bigsby, and Duane absolutely nails it. And it's interesting, as a player, you will be looking out for Duane getting that Bigsby arm, or the whammy bar. I'm just going to call it a whammy bar because it used to be called a Bigsby, but everyone will know it by the whammy bar. Getting that in position so that he can jump straight to it when he wants it, because you've got to be able to jump straight to it in a piece like this, so that he wants it in that horizontal position. Unfortunately, the tendency is for it to drop down into that vertical position, so then you do lose half a second, or every second is vital here, so half a second is a lot, to then go and find the bar, bring it up, and then depress it in order to get that dip in pitch. So he's just always just getting it where he wants it in order to then apply that effect of the decrease in pitch. But of course, it's seamlessly done. And when I mention about the expression, the key is absolutely in making that decrease in pitch last for 1 or 2 seconds, because it has to be a subtle, smooth movement. If you're too quick on that bar, you're just going to get a sudden decrease and then pop straight back up to where you started, whereas that's not what you want. Again, it's all in the expression of the use of that arm. You're pushing it down very slowly and then coming back up. It's the control. You can imagine that if you push down too quickly and it pops straight back up to pitch, it's not going to have that same effect, especially for Ghost Riders in the Sky. This is absolutely essential to get the feel of this right, because you haven't got the luxury of applying the feel with your own vibrato on frets. These are all straight notes, and nobody will play Ghost Riders in the Sky with constant vibrato, because then you'll lose the expression of the track. The other thing that's really subtle in this is the way that you have to apply that alternate picking, and sometimes the alternate picks jumping straight to another string. It's one of those things you do have to be up to speed with alternate picking in order to nail it. Of course, Duane's one of those guys, banjo player as well, but also having those country techniques in there. Alternate picking is an absolute classic country technique that all the great country players absolutely work on and get it up to the top level. So applying it in this rather slower setting is going to be very easy for someone like Duane, but for a beginner guitarist, this is going to be tricky, getting that alternate picking and the expression correct so that you can jump between strings on some of those passages where you do have alternate picks and then you have to jump to another string straight away. For those players that are watching this that have played for a long time, of course it's something that you will be used to. The lead guitar being the main focus of the whole track, being in that spotlight, if there are any mistakes or even a lack of expression in a particular note or a particular phrase, it's really going to stand out. So Duane was one of those guys that could literally take the spotlight and do this, just really express with all of the notes and stay true to the original composition. This is a great version of Ghost Riders in the Sky because it keeps all of that original expression, but then adds all of that atmosphere as well. And Duane was one of those guys that started playing at a really young age 5, and he got his start playing on local radio, and I think a lot of guys around this time, 40s and 50s, that's just how they started. If you were of an age to go and play the pubs and clubs, of course, performers would do that. But if you were a young player, then local radio was the place to try and showcase your talents. And Duane, it wasn't until 1958, but having said that, he still would have only been 20 at that time until he released his Rebel Rouser. That was his main break, because that track went on to sell over 1 million copies. So that was in the USA, and that was the Billboard Hot 100 chart. And that gave him a gold disc, his first ever gold disc, for selling over 1 million copies. And on the release of his debut album in 1959, which was called Have Twangy Guitar Will Travel, that got to number 5 in the charts, and it stayed in the charts for 82 weeks. And bear in mind, again, that Duane's only 21 at this point. And in 1960, Duane recorded a theme for a movie called Because They're Young, and that got to number 4 in the USA and to number 2 here in the UK. And in the UK, we have a magazine called the NME, which is called the New Musical Express. And in that, Duane was voted as the world's #1 musical personality, in which he actually beat Elvis Presley. So he was very well known, even here in the UK, and he consistently charted higher here than he did in the USA. But let's get back into the performance. And there we have it. I just wanted that to go to the end because you just get that great atmosphere in the track, like I mentioned. But also another thing that I want to mention about Duane's playing, the control that he had on that whammy bar, that if you do play yourself, obviously when you're playing this particular track, you want to have control of that whammy and just push it in and just let it out slowly until you can feel the right expression, the way to play it. But then if you're just using the whammy bar for vibrato, then you can try and get the same vibrato with your fretted notes that you can get on the whammy bar, just using that whammy bar, gauging, because it's going to be easier to use that whammy bar in order to get that nice even vibrato. Get used to the sound of it with the right hand with the bar, and then try and replicate that with the left hand, because if you can get exactly the same sound with the left hand, then that's what you're looking for, to have that total control across the whole guitar. But back to Duane, because of course in this track we can't do vibrato where we go down. You'd have to do a pre-bend first, so it's not applicable for this track, but just one of those things to make note of if you are learning to play. And getting back to his own stuff and the way that he did record, he did a lot of work with Lee Hazelwood, who produced a lot of Duane's hits, and he also co-wrote with him as well. And one of the tracks that he did well with Lee was Dance with a Guitar Man, and that got him his 3rd gold disc for selling over 1 million copies. So it shows that Lee could write with Duane as well. They're a great combination like that. And fast forward to 1986, because Duane was still at it, because he had his track called Peter Gunn, and that won a Grammy for Best Rock Instrumental. And it also created history here in the UK, because with that track it meant that Duane had charted in the top 10 over 4 separate decades, which was the first time that had ever happened. And in 1995 he played lead guitar on the Foreigner track Until the End of Time, and that was a top 10 hit. And he was one of the first, if not the first, rock and roll artists to get a signature model guitar, and that was made by Guild Guitars. And he's had such a long and illustrious career, achieved so many things. He's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, he got in there in 1994. He's also in the Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum, and that was in 2008. So great player, obviously really focused on melody, but it's great to see him doing a cover of somebody else's track here, Ghost Riders in the Sky, but he of course has so much of his own stuff and has had some monster hits. But thank you so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one.